Hey, I'm driving home. Time's about 16:55. It's 19 degrees Fahrenheit out. This is not a georant. This is at the request of one of my subscribers, Chaosism. Asked me to touch on this, and I'm going to. He asked me to explain the difference in science between evidence and proof. Like I said before in my last video, proof is a legal term and it is a mathematical term. We never, prove things in science. That's not what we do. We rely on evidence. The difference between evidence and a proof would be this. I don't know if that's the right way to take that or to go down the hole with that, but evidence in science, we rely on empirical evidence, all right? And I don't want to use the word fact because you can have evidence without it being a fact, but you can't have a fact without evidence. I hope that's clear as mud. But evidence is basically just any bit of information. It's kind of almost the same definition as a fact. It's any piece of information except for the verified part, all right? Verified part of the definition. It's just a piece of information. It's an observation or a test that you've done or something like that, some data you've collected. That's all evidence is. Now, evidence can be faulty, and it doesn't, like if your margin of error, is way off or something like that, or you weren't using the proper tool to make the observation, something like that. But you can have indirect evidence that works just as well as evidence. Like, say for example, I'm in the middle of a forest and I can see the farm field vaguely through the trees, and I make the assumption that there's a forest on the other side, all right? Well, what basis do I have to make that assumption? Well, say I have an aerial photograph on me that shows that. All right, so you can have indirect evidence. This is how we map the interior of the Earth without direct drilling. We use seismology, all right? And he also asked me to, I hope that answers the question. He also asked me to explain how you can have a body of evidence that all parties accept as evidence, but get to two totally different conclusions. And science goes the route of taking that evidence and seeing where the evidence leads you in order to develop a hypothesis and a theory. All right? But you can take any body of evidence and haphazardly fit any round peg into a square hole that you want, but if your conclusions aren't backed up by the evidence and you have no built-in way to falsify your conclusion, you're not doing science. You're just pulling stuff out of your rear end. Here's an example. Say my car doesn't start in the morning, okay? Nothing. To go to turn the key, absolutely nothing. All right, I don't immediately assume that three-toed imps came in the middle of the night and started pulling wires. I assume my battery's dead. I left the light on or something, right? The evidence kind of at that stage isn't really good either which way. I've made my hypothesis. I have two hypotheses. Well, okay, we're going to address the gnomes thing first, or the imp thing. Why did I even think of this? Okay, say I have a video of my father from the 80s talking about, just him, like I'm looking at you right now, talking about how in the winter of 75, his battery wouldn't start a bunch of times. And each time he saw three-toed small prints in the snow, so he assumed that it was imps or something because there's only 2 feet, could have been birds. And so he came to the conclusion that these imps were draining his battery. All right. But it's just a video of him talking. It's just a story. Is that evidence of imps? No, it's not. It's evidence of your dad telling a story, but it's not evidence of imps. So the logical person would go down the other hypothesis and say, let me change this battery out and see if my car starts. So I change the battery, fire it up, no problem. Okay? Which one of those is the more viable idea? The imps or my battery drained because I left the light on? It's the latter, all right? Okay? You can make up stories and hypotheses about anything, but you have to remember what is evidence, okay? Somebody telling a story is not evidence. Eyewitness testimony is only evidence in a courtroom. It's the most faulty thing you can rely on for actual evidence, all right? And it's really kind of strange, and I've always found this kind of odd, how when it comes to our technology, things we built, things we are familiar with, things humanity has created, buildings, cars, airplanes, stuff like that, when something goes wrong or something odd happens, we immediately assume there's a technical problem. Okay, something, my furnace in my basement wouldn't click on, the pilot light must be out. But when it comes to the natural world, we're more often than not to immediately assume oogity boogity. Like if you take someone who is a city dweller, has been their whole life, never really been outside the city, stick them in a cabin in the middle of the woods, and they start hearing noises at night. Now, as someone who has a cabin in the middle of the woods, and hears animal sounds, I mean, oh, that's a coyote, that's an owl, no big deal, because I've heard these sounds before, I've seen these animals. But to someone who's unfamiliar with that, they might instantly go to ghosts and aliens. I don't know why the human brain works this way, but it seems to. All right? And that's the whole thing with the ancient aliens thing. Anyway. But chaosism, I hope that answers your questions okay. If anyone else needs me to clarify something or try to explain something better, and I hope those examples are good enough, please comment below, or if you have any other questions you need me to expand on. I'm not going to talk about a scientific theory and all that. I've already done that in a previous video. But anyway, that's it, and I hope you learned something.